Good afternoon, everyone. Atlantic overturning circulation. The AMOC weakest in more than 1,000 years. This is what brings warm waters and keeps Europe from freezing during the winters. Problem is, one of the inputs into the system, the Florida current, the weakest it's been in more than 110 years. And the Gulf Stream itself, matching the warmth in 1872. Hasn't been this warm in more than 150 years. It's because it's moving slower, so it's warming. But when the water moves up into the Atlantic where it should sink, it's not. It's pooling. Saw some of the same in 2012, the year of Hurricane Sandy, and that trifecta of badness. Beaufort Sea now dumping an enormous amount of fresh water in there, so it looks like the input, the termination point, and the sink area all having difficulty. You have to wonder if any of this is related to our poles on the move to a shift or the grand solar minimum intensifying as we speak. But if the AMOC stops, these are degrees Celsius on how much the temperatures across the northern hemisphere are going to drop. Looks like the best place to be during that time would be Namibia in West Africa. The last time we had a Democrat-led Congress and president was during the first years of the Obama administration. Janet Yellen was the Fed chair then, and now soon to be the new Treasury Secretary under Biden. Obamacare was passed, President Obama and Congress sent billions to banks and Wall Street. That was the perfect recipe, and gold soared more than 200% from 2008 to 2011. We know Joe Biden is well versed in the Obamonomics, and raising taxes was the centerpiece of the campaign. History doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. Patriot Gold Group has the No Fee for Life IRA, where your IRA or 401k can be in physical gold and silver, and you may be eligible for the No Fee for Life IRA. So go ahead and give the folks at Patriot Gold Group a call to discuss physical gold and silver. And the knowledge that Patriot Gold Group is Consumer Affairs' top-rated gold IRA dealer 5 years in a row from 2016 until present. Click the link in the description box below for more information. And now on with the video. Oh, and the elephant in the room. Let's start. Nobody wants to talk about the polar wander, the South Atlantic magnetic anomaly, or how these poles are coming closer and closer to each other, supposedly to meet somewhere around Indonesia. We know the poles are always wandering. Been measuring this time immemorial, really good record since the 1600s, but what nobody wants to touch with a 1,000-foot pole is the regularity. That once we start going into extreme polar wander, as we are now, not even a full-blown reversal, but enough to allow an enormous amount of cosmic rays in that affect everything terrestrially, all life, ocean circulation, jet streams, and everything you know would shift on a dime if this happens. And you know what? We're right about that pivot point again. You could call it the galactic cross, the midway point in precession, whatever you like. There's so many terms for it. But the regularity of these 12,000-year excursion flips and back in, perhaps what we're seeing with all the gyrations in our Earth systems right now, including humanity's mind and mind frame, are all part of this going into something that would reset humanity anyway. And let's go to the very lightest form of change that's happening right now, this grand solar minimum on its 400-year cycle. The 1,600-year cycle, the 12,000-year cycle, those are a little bit longer. But the solar activity in the low heading into what would be a reset anyway is happening with this 400-year repeating cycle. So let's wide out then, 1,000 years of time. AMOC. This is the overturning circulation that's in the Atlantic that takes that warm water from the Gulf of Mexico and makes it sink and travel all the way around the Atlantic. And as the warm water is dissipating and sinking at the same time, as you can see around Greenland, It's bringing extra warmth over to the UK and Western Europe. Without this current, London would be about the same temperatures as Moscow in the winter. Very important that this would keep moving. So the AMOC, the definition of the North Atlantic Ocean circulation, it's a large system of ocean currents. It's a conveyor belt. The temperature difference of the warm Gulf waters, the salinity content, which affects how dense it is, will then sink if it's dense, if the saline content is high. If it's not saline and it's more fresh, it's going to stay at the surface and it's not going to sink as quickly. So the area right here on the map is where the heat is dissipated and the water sinks into the depths and does its traverse around the oceans to come back into the Gulf again and make that loop once more. Easy map for you to understand how this heat from the Gulf of Mexico, from the Caribbean, travels up the East Coast, out through Canada, into the Atlantic, circulates around, dissipates up, and starts to sink around that area below Greenland, Iceland, and to the west of the British Isles. That has slowed down to a mere trickle. And what I like here with the researchers, they didn't have the bias going into the article. They showed at the end of the Little Ice Age, around 1850, the currents began to decline. Nothing to do with you or me, natural cycle. So they were able to map this out over the last 1,600 years and came to the conclusion, even at that time frame, duration, 1,600 years, it's a cycle in itself. So then what you need to think about is there's a beginning point and a termination point. So where does this warm water start? Well, Gulf of Mexico along through Florida. And guess what? That current's at its weakest in 110 years. Slowing down when it moves. So if it slows down, it has more time to capture heat. And the areas they measured here, red box, as you can see, the outflows with the yellow shows the current speed, strength. So that's going to slow down slightly. And when it does, it's going to warm up. And we're going to get this exact pattern right here. February 21, you can see the red. Well, that's where it's dissipating out, warmer than usual, but not sinking either. And you'll say, wow, that's strange. 2012, it happened also. And you might remember 2012, Hurricane Sandy. Now, when that heat is up there, that means more intense storms are going to be able to form in that region because they have more energy on the input versus over cold water. Storms don't get so strong. But what's causing all the water to pool up there and not sink should be the main question. And then combining that with the actual temperatures of the Gulf Stream, we need to go back to 1872 to find the same equivalent temperatures that are being registered today. So it's not the first time. As you can see clearly, it was far warmer in the 1870s for the Gulf Stream, and it took us all this time to come back up to the same equivalent temperature more than 150 years ago. And a little bit wider out here, and the reason I'm showing you this is the La Nina pattern that is holding at the moment and shall stay in this colder Pacific for about 2 to 3 more months, ushering in more tornadoes for the U.S. coming up in spring. But you can see the warmth still spinning off into the North Atlantic up there. And as we come into January 2021, you can see that the heat even increasing going off into the Atlantic. But at the same time, you can see off of South America, cooler as well. So the forecast is, for those of you who want to know, springtime, beware. An enormous amount of tornadoes are going to form with this La Nina pattern holding. February, March, April, they're looking at least an 80% probability of strong La Nina holding through this time frame. What happens when we get these variable polar jet streams? It's going to lock things in place. But notice the termination point of where that flow is going to go. It's going to flow right up over into Canada, right over that warmer water. But at the same time in spring, we're going to get all these vortices in the atmosphere. 2011 is that giant bar there. So the most tornadoes since, 1954 occurred in 2011. We're looking at the exact same setup, except that La Nina is just not as strong as 2011. a sliver less, but this is a repeat. Be careful this spring. So when I'm talking about the sinking of the water, this is at the 500-meter depth. So those of you in the U.S., it's 1,500 feet in depth. They're still registering this warmth, which means it's not sinking and dissipating as it was before. There's got to be another couple causations here because the Florida current's slow and warm. The circulation itself through the entire Atlantic, lowest in 1,000 years. And then here is yet another, the trifecta. Freshwater outflows from the Beaufort Sea. That's also going to add into the freshness of the water, reducing the sink ability of that area of the ocean to take that warmer water, pull it down, and dissipate that heat out. And if we read from Los Alamos here, a quote from the article that they published, Beaufort Sea, the Arctic Ocean's largest freshwater reservoir, has increased its freshwater content by 40% in the last 2 decades. So see, it was already a freshwater known spot in the Arctic anyway. So don't let that fool you that something melted to create the freshwater. It was already there. The Arctic Ocean's largest known freshwater reservoir since time immemorial is now spilling further out into that same area and reducing the mixing and the sinking. Now, what does this have to do with you and I right now? Well, perhaps a lot of these incredible events of cold that we're seeing and wind would have something to do with this surface air temperature anomaly. If the AMOC stops and that overturning circulation stops, it's not going to be the day after tomorrow movie, but it's going to be this. These are degrees Celsius below or above the normal of what we have today. So most of the northern hemisphere is going to be shattered with extreme cold. 8 degrees Celsius, that's about 12 degrees Fahrenheit cooler than the average temperature. Can you imagine what havoc that would wreak on being able to grow crops? But looking at this, it gives you a good indication of where it might start to get warmer if this circulation stops. Western Africa and Namibia would probably be the prime spot, which means that rainfall would increase, that desert would bloom, as well as Northern Africa. Look at all that. All that cool means more rainfall as well. So Africa would be like a sweet spot to be in if this AMOC really does stop. Parts of South America as well. And it's just interesting how the southern hemisphere is not really affected by this, but you would expect that because the change in the Atlantic Ocean and the North Atlantic would affect the northern hemisphere, not so much southern hemisphere. But then the fullest whiteout we can get with temperatures across the oceans right now, you can see La Nina off of South America there, the incredible dark blue, cooler temperatures across the Pacific. We have some cool temperatures under South Africa there. And then also off of eastern United States and Canada, you can see the warmth. And as we go all the way into July, August, and September, we still have that La Nina, although it's dissipating. But look at the heat spinning off the U.S., but I would say look at the heat coming off of Asia and the oceans off of Japan. Talk about typhoon central, especially when they start to spin north and churn off of Japan and head back toward Alaska. Ooh, that's going to be fuel. This might be the first year that there's ever a recorded hurricane in a tropical hurricane summer season in the Arctic because of this. Just guessing what could possibly happen. But with the jet streams breaking and bending, this grand solar minimum intensifying, the polar magnetic wander, and all these multiple cycles lining up on top of each other right this year, that's a nature reset. I think humans are riding on top of the natural cycle, claiming their own reset, but the great creator always takes center stage over self-appointed oligarchs. And I talk more about these changes on my Patreon channel /Adapt2030. You can join me there. I put content that I don't publish here on YouTube. And I wish you the best in your preparations. Please beware, this spring is going to be ferocious for the weather and the mixing of the air. Upper level currents, mid-level currents, low level currents, and we are going to get an enormous amount of spinning in the atmosphere. And then as we come into, as you see, the summer with all the extra energy for storms to form, across the oceans, and what's been affected food production-wise, what will be diminished during the summer, massive food price rises, and it all just fits that something extraordinary is happening on our planet across vast swaths of repeating time. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next video.